strategy,
design,
marketing,
UX,
digital.
development.
This is Agencies That Build. This show is dedicated to leaders and teams that design and deploy in the digital world. My name is Jessie, and I'm a marketer and an agency owner.
And I'm Varun. I'm not a marketer, but a coder and an agency partner.
This show is sponsored by Together We Ship.
On a mission to help agencies grow.
All right, rock on. Hi, Varun. How are you?
Great. How are you?
Long time no chat. That's going to be my catchphrase, I've decided. Episode 3, even though, we just talked.
We just talked last Friday.
It's true. All right, everybody. So today's guest is a thought leader, a speaker frequently at DjangoCon, PyCon, and SALT conference. He has published many works in Forbes, Fast Company, Tech Republic. He's the co-author of High Performance Django. He's founder of Lincoln Loop, Pete Baumgartner. Welcome to the show, Pete.
Cool. Yeah. Thanks for having me.
It's an epic introduction that you have right there.
It sounds a lot more impressive than it is, I think.
All right. So in episode 3, what we're going to do is we're going to change things up, and we're going to ask you, we've done a couple episodes as Varun and I have eased our way in, and we actually really love this question. So we're going back to it. We asked it in season 1. So the first question out of the gate is myth busting. Smash some kind of myth for us, some bogus strategy, a misconception, something that you want to set the record straight on, something you want to clear up. What do you got cooking? What do you think?
Okay. I'm going to run with, you really don't need a deep connection of people to be all plugged into a network in order to start an agency and start doing this. I started Lincoln Loop out in the kind of middle of nowhere in the mountains in Colorado. I didn't know anybody in Silicon Valley or, San Francisco or anything like that. And, just try to do good work and kind of work my way up the ladder. And it's worked out pretty well for us. So
counterintuitive. I mean, when we say deep network of people, you must have some sort of network. Like you're not sitting in a corner coding and building away, right? There has to be, or are you just kind of dove in, built it, and just started chatting with people? Talk to us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, I think that, I think that was it. I think diving in and putting yourself out there and, whether it's writing or speaking or, participating in online discussions or, whatever it is, I think pretty quickly you can, people will find you if you're doing good work and you're putting yourself out there. So yeah, as you build and grow, you certainly will get a network. We're not working. I wouldn't say we don't have a network now, but yeah, I think when we started, we had none, and it was just me, and I was freelancing and kind of scrapping for small jobs in the town I live in, but also working on blogging and attending conferences and trying to speak and that sort of stuff. And it just kind of grew organically from there.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So you made an interesting point, because you did not feel the need for the network of people. And when you say network, I am assuming it's not the people who would actually do the work. It's about people who you will work with. Are you talking about network of people, of your prospect clients, or at least people who can give you references and people who can get you more business? Is that the network we're talking about?
Yeah, I would say it applies for both. When I started, our focus is Python and Django development, and the initial team I had kind of put together as the company grew, I hadn't met most of them for the first couple of years that we worked together, and it wasn't until we've worked with somebody out of New Zealand. Our company is, I guess we're based in the States. Officially, we're registered in the States, but we have a lot of folks from Europe, and we hadn't met a lot of them for years. So it's yeah, we started with no network, both for clients and for, you know, kind of a team and hiring people, and the location where I'm at, it's maybe better now, but 10, 15 years ago was not, we didn't really have a lot of opportunity as far as tech where I am.
And the key for growth for you, especially is, as you're saying, it was more about getting your word, getting yourself out, like going and talking, speaking in these conferences and writing about it, just showing your thought leadership. And Python Django, you know, back in the days, it was not that popular as it is now. So it was still a very niche, very small community. So you were recognized as a leader in the community by doing some good work and just talking about it. You know, is that the idea for you?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'm hesitant. I hate the term thought leader, but yeah, you know, it was early days, and there weren't a lot of people out there doing professional work in it. So we, you know, I could kind of come in and talk about what I was doing, and that was, you know, new and interesting at the time.
Why did you pick Python Django? Why, like, you know, like,
yeah, I was doing a lot of work in WordPress, and just felt like I was kind of outgrowing what I could do there, and was sort of looking for a framework that was not, you know, built around blogging or something like that. I was building a real estate site at the time that connected to MLS and pulled in all the listings and stuff, and trying to cram it into like a WordPress plugin was not the way to go. And I had played around with Ruby on Rails a little bit, and kind of played with Python and Django, and Python and Django kind of just fit my head better than Ruby on Rails did. And I think I kind of saw Ruby on Rails was by that time, and there were a lot of agencies out there that were offering, you know, Ruby on Rails specific kind of consulting, and I saw Django as being, you know, 2-3 years behind that curve, and figured that might be a good place to hang my hat, and sort of expect that it was going to do the same thing that Rails was going to do, or Rails had already done.
Right, right. So it's also interesting because you chose Django Python at the time when it was not popular. So you must have seen something, you know, because people follow where the crowd is, like which everyone is doing. You want to tend to do that because that's a demand. But you kind of went the other direction and picked something that you liked. Did you have some vision about this growing, or did you like? Was it just because you liked the way it was? You like the way to program in it, or was there something else that made you, you know, choose that?
I did. One of the philosophies of Python is that there's kind of one right way to do things, and I think, you know, certainly there's many ways you can do it, but the, you know, kind of best practice and convention says, you know, everybody should kind of do it this way. And I think Ruby was much more creative, and you know, they call it there's more than one way to do it. There's some acronym there for that, that it's a language where there's more than one way to do it. And
Could say there's like
for me, that was hard. Like I'd pick up somebody's code and I had a hard time following it because they used a different way than somebody else. And the other really impressive thing with Django was their documentation. It was far and away better than Rails or anything else out there I'd used. So kind of between those two, it made sense to me. And I think the business aspect came later. Like I could build what I was trying to accomplish in Python and Django, and that worked for me, and that kind of got me using it and writing about it and all that. But I could also see, you know, as I did that, like maybe this thing has legs and is not going to be a flash in the pan type project.
Do you feel like getting so niche focused with those, you know, Python and Django allowed you to get strategic about how to network? I'm circling back to the first question.
No, yeah. unintentionally, absolutely. Like looking back on it now, that was good. That advertising yourself, we probably know now, like just saying like, yeah, we do web development, or we're a web agency, like it's a huge net. You're in a pool with a lot of different people or a lot of different agencies, and generally not a great idea to operate that way. I don't think I realized that at the time, but in hindsight, it was great that, yeah, that was our niche, and we could kind of at the time be sort of front runners in it. There's a couple other agencies out there that started around the same time we did that are both successful, and we're all friends, and happy to kind of share leads between each other and all that. But yeah, I think having that niche really helped us focus, and I think over the years we kind of flirted with getting out of it and doing more stuff. We are a full stack agency, so we do UX, we do DevOps, we do JavaScript stuff. And we flirted with kind of pushing those things more, but I think we've always fallen back on Django as our kind of core competency, and we want to help people get websites from idea on a napkin to running in production in Django. And so we have all these other kind of services and abilities to help people do that.
It's an interesting thing that I think a lot of agencies struggle with, especially from a growth perspective, is trying to figure out what they want to be known for. I mean, in marketing, that's, number one problem. As a lifetime marketer over here, my biggest question is, I can market anything, but who you want to talk to? Who's your target audience?
Right.
And I think it's smart that you guys, that the niche allows you to fill a hole in a brain. So people go, okay, it's easy for them to refer. It's easy for them to sell. Like, even if it wasn't conscious for you, it makes it super simple to say, oh yeah, those guys are the experts. And then it ends up actually being the reality. Like, you are the experts. You are, for all intents and purposes, a thought leader.
Yeah.
In that space. So.
It's been interesting too, because we primarily marketed to the people the people that know us aren't the people signing the checks. Which would generally you wouldn't want to operate that way. But we found we kind of have a back door in that, a project comes into a company and their development team says, you know what, this is over our head, like we need help. And they're going to talk to the person that writes the checks and say, we should really hire these guys. They seem like they know what they're doing. I've been reading their blog, they help me learn, what I know now. So that's, yeah, that was also purely accidental. And I think, if it's kind of against common wisdom that, you probably want to be selling to somebody who can actually purchase what you're doing.
Not necessarily. I'd actually disagree with you on that one. I think that influencer sale, I don't know what the official name is, so I'm stamping it influencer sale right now. You heard it here first, is a big opportunity for folks like us in this space too, because you're getting in, the buyer isn't always the most knowledgeable person. The buyer is the one. Having running marketing teams in the past, I trust my team to bring me challenges and solutions. If they say, I want to buy this software, I say, tell me why you need it and how much more money is it going to make us? And then I'll sign the check. But I'm not the one out there researching. So when you're in with the people who are the influencers and the decision, they're going to influence the decision maker. You've got it in, and that person is going to take you from this company to this company and this,
Yes.
So
and we've seen that for sure. Somebody was a developer at one shop and now they're a CTO at a new place, and they said, oh yeah, we worked with you. It was great. Yeah. That's been great.
Totally. It's, I actually think it's a smarter strategy because you're not always in pitch mode.
Right.
You're balancing out kind of your multiple revenue streams with the people that are going to butter your bread versus the people that you're not quite sure what kind of bread you're buying yet. It always comes back to food. I'm sorry.
Yeah. And I'm terrible at pitching in general, I would say. I'm happy to kind of like speak about what we know, but I'm not in sales and marketing, and I'm like lost when it comes to that stuff. So it's great that we can kind of keep the technical slant and it works for us.
So let's talk about your agency for a quick minute, because you guys are a little bit of a different animal than some of the other folks we talked to, which, you hinted at it earlier, but you guys are fully remote. You're in 7 countries, if I'm not mistaken. And you've been remote
Yeah,
since day
I
one.
don't know the current count. It's right around there. We just started working with somebody in Brazil who's the first, not the first. We had somebody in South America before, and they moved to Sweden. They live in Sweden. They still work with us, but yeah, so around 7, I would say.
We'll give you 7 or 8. We'll give you like 7 plus. How's that?
Yeah. Again, it was a function of where I was. Like I started in this small town, no tech scene whatsoever, and that I couldn't afford to bring somebody out here at the time. I was a freelancer, just going from 1 to 2 people, and I had no interest in moving someplace else. And I'd been involved in open source just through Django, doing kind of collaborative development remotely. So it didn't seem that odd at the time. This was 2007, just to kind of hire people and work with them remotely. And that just kind of grew, and I never, nobody, I think it was, it's a perk, which I think people are coming around to and figuring out more recently. But, we've had people that have worked with us and have moved to, 3 different countries in that time, or across the country. And they can keep working with us because we don't have a central place. And I think being remote from the beginning was a huge advantage. I see the challenge in going from a kind of co-located company to remote, or I think one of the hardest ones is a co-located company with some remote people. I think it doesn't work well unless everybody is kind of in that remote mindset. You end up with people having conversations around the office, and then they wonder why their remote workers are out of touch. So you really have to kind of have conversations in places where everybody can read them, whether it's Slack or Basecamp or email or whatever. The guy who's the CTO of GitHub now, Neiman, had a thing like a long time ago. He posted online. I wish it's not up anymore. I wish it were, because it was great. And it was like a blog post that said everybody phones in, and it was kind of like they when they had meetings, even though there were some people, I'm sure we've all been in meetings where there's like a bunch of people in a conference room, and you're calling in and you realize like you're not on the same level ground as everybody else. You can't see expressions, and you don't know what's going on. So his post was basically saying, even when you're all in the same building, everybody phones in, so everybody's kind of on equal ground.
Yeah, so it's interesting. You are I think the only company the people that we spoke to who have the largest remote presence, or largest presence in most of the countries. So, and when you say you have people in 7 or more countries, how do you go about hiring? Like, there must be some. So are they like freelancers, contractors, or other companies that you partner with? How do you pick and how do you choose who to work with? I know that you are specialists, so you must be looking for a really high quality coder who has done something substantial in Python Django's, because you want to make sure that they keep the quality. But then how do you go about finding them?
Yeah, I would say most of the people that we work, the people that are really successful here, have been freelancers, have been contractors in the past. They're used to managing their own time, managing clients, and all that. Those people tend to do really well with us. People that are used to kind of having a day job where they go in and go out and have somebody else telling them what to do every day, tend to kind of flail at our company a little bit. And so, yeah, a lot of people are people I've seen through the open source world, where, oh yeah, we've been using, some package that this person wrote, and let's reach out and see if they're available. Or people I've seen speak. Generally, they have some presence in the community before we're reaching out to them. That's not always the case, but often it is. And as far as kind of how we work with them, generally the international folks we'll work with as contractors. They usually have a small business kind of registered in their own company, and our business pays their business. We have been working with a company lately called Pilot. There's two pilots out there. One is bookkeeping and the other one does like international payments. And they have a really cool system where they've already registered businesses in a bunch of countries. So potentially we could hire somebody, they'd be an employee of their business, but we could pay them through that and kind of manage it that way. But that scenario hasn't come up yet. Generally, kind of, I find once people have jumped through that hoop of freelancing and contracting and having their own business, it's not a big deal for them. Like they don't have any desire to become an employee again. They figure out how to write off their, part of their house as an office expense and all that. So generally people are happy with that. And then folks in the States are employees. We usually do kind of contract to hire type arrangements. So we kind of do a trial run with somebody for, a few months or a year or whatever. And then if things are working out, jump through the hoops of, you have to register a business in each state, and then you have to do some calculations on what percentage of your revenue came from people working in each state and pay taxes that way. So it's certainly a hassle. And for a long time, we kind of operated in a gray area where some of our contractors, maybe didn't check all the boxes for being a contractor. And that was a big reason why we kind of switched people to employees. We do offer them a lot of autonomy where they can set their own hours and decide how they want to work and all that. But, we wanted to be able to pay them bonuses and fly them to conferences and things like that you wouldn't normally do with a contractor.
Do you feel like that brings some sort of level of loyalty to the brand as well? Like as an agency, it's an interesting pivot point, especially with the laws in the States when you're hiring, somebody. Either I'll pick on Massachusetts because we have horrible laws there. It's one of the worst states to hire people in because of all of the things, it's expensive. So my question for you is, having people going from contractors to freelancers, especially in the States, Massachusetts being like a really high state, expensive state to hire people in, for example, but you guys, being global, does it, bringing some of these people in as employees, do you find there's like a little bit, I mean, maybe you don't, but I would say your staff, do you find that there's a little bit more sense of loyalty and, camaraderie and culture, I guess, for whatever culture you can create out of a virtual team? That's my next question too. How do you create culture out of a virtual team? So
I don't know if that does. I think the biggest thing for us is kind of that trust and autonomy, trusting people to do the work that they're able to do, and giving them the flexibility and space to do that. I think if you asked some of the folks that we work with, that's probably going to be their answer as to why they wouldn't, want to leave. Most of our team has been with us for over 10 years, which is kind of unheard of in the tech industry. And, we can't pay as much as Google or Facebook or one of these companies, but we can offer them really solid kind of work-life balance, and also that kind of autonomy to figure out their own role and to do the work they want to do the way they want to do it, which I think people don't get in a lot of places, even if they are working remotely. I think one of the idea being distributed not only like geographically, but like enough that the time zones are all over the place. We've kind of learned to work asynchronously, and it's really nice for people that have families. And like it's not uncommon to see somebody say like, hey, it's nice out, I'm gonna go play with my kids, or we're gonna go sledding or whatever in the middle of the day because nothing's going on, or they can work later, or they don't need to, work 9 to 5 every single day. So having that flexibility, I think, is something that promotes people feel more loyal to that, I think, than kind of employee contractor stuff.
How do
freedom.
oh, go ahead.
Having freedom is a great point, because employees would definitely love that. I mean, if the organization is giving them the flexibility and have them work at their own hours, and if your business is set up such that it allows them to do that, it's hard to get out of that routine. My question is, again, I'm still curious about how you have been working with people all over the place, right? So you have 7+ countries. You said you have someone as far as New Zealand. So how far would you go? Like, I know you said you have some Europe, some Brazil, some New Zealand. So would you say that there is no boundary? I mean, you would work with people anywhere? And if yes, then how do you coordinate with everybody, right? I mean, and I'm assuming, again, you are not the one, or maybe you are, I don't know how you have set up, like, who is the one person who is taking the ownership and making sure things are aligned as a team? Everyone is, I mean, so there are a lot of questions in this statement. So I'm, hoping you get what I'm asking. So
yeah, time zones are a challenge, and it's hard, and I think sometimes it makes the work better, and sometimes it makes the work a lot more challenging. If you can get everybody on this cycle of, we communicate via some written manner, and generally it's not like a quick message in Slack. It's like I'm going to take a couple minutes and write down a thoughtful, thing in an issue or on a discussion board somewhere or something like that. I think you get much better communication, regardless of time zone, when people have to kind of think about what they want to say versus just, blurting something out in a meeting or on Slack or whatever. That being said, but there's challenges with it. Our clients are in the States for the most part, and we don't have, like, our developers are working directly with our clients. So the guy that works for us in New Zealand, he can overlap with our clients on the East Coast in the afternoon. But if he has something that's like not working right or whatever, and then everybody comes in the morning, it's kind of like, oh shoot, like, do we bring somebody else in to work on this, or do we just, cool our jets and wait a few hours? So that's a challenge. And I certainly would say, it's a lot easier to work within a few hours. Having at least 4 hours of overlap is really nice. Beyond that, having everybody in the office at the same time, I don't think matters. But when you only have an hour or two of overlap, that can be a real challenge. Like, we generally, the person that works for us in New Zealand, we generally try not to pair him with somebody that's working with us in Europe, because it's like almost a 12-hour difference. So somebody's going to be making a sacrifice there. And so we try not to do that. But, we've also kind of figured out ways to make it work. It's hard.
Yeah, autonomy must help, the ability to have everybody and the flexibility. So
yeah, absolutely. And some people are willing to make a sacrifice to make it happen, whether, if that means they have to get on a call at 7 a.m. or 7 p.m. But we really don't want to ask that of our team on a regular basis. Like, that's not fair.
exception.
So yeah, we try to kind of line things up where people can work during their business hours, or, we've got somebody who, I'll see comments from him on Slack at like 3 a.m. his time. And that's just when he likes to work. And, when he's, I think he's got a handful of kids at home, and, probably when his house is quiet and all that, and that's fine too. We really just ask that folks kind of communicate where they're at, and people know when we have a meeting with a client, or things that have to happen at a certain time, but other than that, they're kind of free to do what they want. And I think there was something else in your question that made me think of one of the Basecamp folks' philosophies is hiring managers of one, which basically people that don't need managers, that can manage themselves. And that's really big for us, having people that they know what needs to get done. They know when they need to be there. They know when they don't need to be there. And not having somebody trying to chase people down in this arrangement doesn't work. It's super frustrating. And trying to figure out, like, we've had people where we've hired them and they just literally don't show up, but in an office, that's obvious. Like, yeah, they're not in the office, but when you're working remotely, it's kind of hard to tell. And you can, kind of like fudge your way around it. Like, oh yeah,
you turn your Slack on so it's light, but you're not.
Yeah, like they're doing like some code commits, but like it doesn't seem like that much. And then you kind of get a week or two in, and you're like, they're not working. Like, they probably like got another job or something. And
so you're not hiring
so things like that
juniors
are hard.
there. You're not getting interns. You're not getting straight out of school peeps. Usually, you have people with a few years.
We aren't. We've really. I keep coming back to wanting to do that, but we've really struggled with it in the past. And I think we struggle where a lot of agencies do. Like, we make our money on billable work, and we have to be a certain amount billable to be profitable. And kind of figuring out a way that we can, we're not at a place where we have to be, anywhere near 100% billable, but figuring out ways we can carve out time to really mentor somebody. And do that remotely is not a nut we've really cracked yet. I know it's possible, but I think in the past we've kind of gone into it with this manager of one philosophy, and or people that are just starting their career rarely kind of have that skill yet. So, and I think that's why we do well with the freelancers and contractors and people who've already figured that stuff out.
Well, it's probably a combo of what you're doing. Sorry, Varun, I keep interrupting you, but it's, the type of work you're doing versus what you're doing versus, like, even the other people that you've hired. Do people have the skills to manage? Not that they don't, but, that takes a different kind of personality that, warrants those. All right, Varun, sorry,
Yeah, I'll come back to the billability question, but I heard something when you said the manager of one and having your developer work directly with the clients, right? So I can understand that happening. I know agencies do that over here when their people are in states, but when developers are outside in other countries, how do you trust them? How do you feel issue or a concern about what happens because you don't know him, you have never seen him, you don't know if they're going to stay put with your organization, or may just go behind your back and work directly with the customer. Have those thoughts occurred to you, or how have you dealt with that scenario, or maybe that has happened to you in the past? I don't know. That was something.
So we're in this really lucky place where, now most of the folks, like I said, have been with us for over 10 years. I have very, I trust them, and, everybody has their weak points, but I know everybody's weak points. So I know, okay, this person is not going to be a good fit for this specific role, but, this person's going to be a good fit, and I can let them run with it, and it's all good. Early on, when I didn't have that yet, it was hard, and I think that's part of kind of that growth from being a freelancer to kind of running your own agency, that you have to give up control. Like, otherwise you're never going to do it. And I've definitely had it, like, early on. I can think of a project that it totally blew up in my face. Like, I had a team of people and we were all working on this, and I got ghosted by like 2 of the 3 people a couple weeks before the project was due, and that was terrifying. Like, luckily the client was kind of understanding, and the other person on the project really kind of picked up the slack. But yeah, it's hard, and now I can put people in that I trust and have that rapport with, and know what they're going to do. But early on, yeah, it was a little more kind of cowboy, and keeping your fingers crossed that it worked. And I can think of better ways to handle that now, but I had never done. The other thing is, I had never worked at an agency before kind of starting our own, so I had no idea how it all worked. And I think there's such better information out there now than there was 15 years ago about how to do all this stuff. So I was definitely figuring it out as I went along, and definitely made some mistakes along the way.
So how did you get into this role? Sorry, Varun, I cut you off. I don't know what you're going to ask, but I figured it was a good segue,
Yeah.
Yeah, I graduated from college with a computer science degree in 2000, and that was right when the dot-com bust was happening. And I kind of quickly realized it was like me coming out of college, competing against people that had 20 years experience, that were like willing to do anything so they could continue to pay their mortgage. So I kind of just skipped it. Like, I moved to Colorado. I was a ski bum, and I worked in a ski shop for a few years, and slowly kind of worked my way back into the computer world. I worked at like a computer kind of repair place for a little bit in town, and started doing some small business networking stuff. And then those people I was working with were, like struggling with a kind of really an email provider that was local to town. That was, this is before Gmail, and before like who hosts your email was an obvious thing.
AOL.
Yeah, right.
And the mailable DVDs.
Yeah. So started hosting email for people, and once you start doing that, then it's like, okay, your website comes along with it. Then it was like, can you make a change to my website? And I had very little experience with kind of programming on the web, but sort of just stumbled onto it that way. And I was more into sitting in my home doing development than driving, all over town all day trying to, figure out why somebody kicked an Ethernet cable out of their computer or something.
Excuse me, sir. Is it plugged in?
Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of how I ended up in it, and then sort of worked my way into more and more development, and eventually kind of bigger clients, to where it started just doing sort of brochure site type stuff, to more kind of in-depth development, which was where I had more interest, because I wasn't a designer. So yeah, I fumbled through that for a while, and then hired some designers to help me with that. But yeah, that's kind of how I ended up there.
So where you're
It's
at,
fascinating to hear that you also, you basically taught yourself Python and programming, and you have reached a point where you are writing books about it. So that's pretty amazing and inspiration, because we talk to a lot of agency owners who have, who are into this field either because they have done something similar, or they have they want to be flexible and independent, but from non-technical background to a technical focus, agency shop is quite I think a different setup altogether.
Yeah, I did have a computer science degree, but a lot of that was like, learning how, logic gates work, and like the insides of, how a computer kind of operates. And I did some C programming then, so I kind of had the basics of like how computer programming works, but nothing like what I ended up doing on the web.
Yeah.
Let's talk about how you run your agency. I have a couple of fun notes from our original chat before this episode. You guys do, I believe my note says you do some crazy stuff a different way than other people. That's literally what the note says. How is it true that your books are fully transparent? Is that something we want to spend a few minutes talking about, how you guys do that? I mean, it's just so interesting to me. And so, it makes sense, but I would love to hear some of your thoughts and how you kind of got there, if you're open to sharing.
Yeah. Yeah, we use Xero for bookkeeping, and everybody that's been with us for more than a couple of years has full access to that, or read only, I guess. They're not like making entries in there, but they can go in and see it, and they can see how much everybody else makes. They can see how much I make. They have info or insight into all that, and I think it kind of came from two different angles. One was I felt like I had a really good team, and I was like terrified of losing them. And I have been in that role where you don't have any of that financial information. And pretty quickly people jump to the conclusion that we're getting screwed here,
Or you're
like
going under and you need to find a new job.
Or like the owner's just, rolling in it. He's probably, buying new houses and new cars, and, we're down here fighting for scraps. And I wanted to cut that off before any of that, started. And I wanted people to be able to see like, this is, like how much we can, when we pay people this much, this is how much the company makes, and be able to connect the dots there. I think the other thing was, I read this book called Maverick by Ricardo Semler. And he is a guy is in Brazil who ran his company. Like he threw everything out the window, like any playbook. Like it was the company, basically like totally open, like anybody could come to any meeting. I think he had like a rotating CEO, and he would like let competitors come in, and they did like manufacturing and stuff, and let competitors come in and see like how they operated. And he'd, just like everything, like the books were open for, everybody down to like the people that clean the floors to, up top. And I just loved the idea of that transparency and that level of trust, and saw that as a way to really kind of come together as a team, and so people can see like how I don't know how you work when you don't see how you really affect the bottom line. If you're just coming in and punching out and don't know, what that means in the grand scheme of business. I think we all have like probably higher aspirations in business than to make money, but at the end of the day, like we're doing this to feed our families and have a place to live and all that. So seeing the full equation, I think, is really important for that.
And it's interesting to hear that. I just want to ask one thing here. Have you, because we have also, played with that idea a little bit, but we are, I feel we have a culture difference because our team was overseas, and then people don't have that mindset of open book, open concept, right? So, and I know you also work with people from different companies. Have you seen, and I'm assuming they also know everything, or is it only about your full-time employees who are in States? Because in States, I can see people getting that level of maturity where they can think beyond, they can see the contribution, like how their contribution is affecting everyone and how everyone else is getting paid. But in other countries, have you seen any difference, or how have you seen?
I don't think so. I haven't. It definitely requires some education, just giving somebody like access to accounting software. I learned pretty quickly, like some people, I can kind of navigate that and understand, where things are going, but explaining to people, how taxes work in the States, like, oh yeah, we were going to pay estimated taxes quarterly. Like that's not a thing that everybody's used to. And, explaining even concepts like accounts receivable, like, somebody will come in and look at the banks and, the bank account and be like, well, it seems like we're really low on money. And it's like, well, no, like, look, accounts receivable is really high and we don't, everybody pays. So like, you have to kind of teach people how to look at those different numbers and figure it out. So for a long time, I kind of distilled that and kind of presented that to the team monthly, and I've gotten away from it, but I think we'll kind of get more into that again. We just started working with a fractional CFO. In the past, we've just had a bookkeeper that's kind of done our books and invoicing monthly, but not much beyond that. So I'm excited about having some deeper insight into the numbers and what they mean and being able to kind of show that to the team.
It goes back to staffing and who you're bringing in to be able to understand that, it's you have to get a certain level of career experience to understand, even be able to ask intelligent questions about what is this, and have the confidence to ask the questions rather than be like, the junior people is usually where some of that paranoia lives. So it's an interesting model. How do you guys create culture? Like that's one I wanted to ask it earlier, but we headed off in a tangent that was interesting too. But remote, it must be, I mean, are there regularly scheduled meetings that you're all on, or is it like, how have you found that? I think that's something a lot of people right now struggle with too, being all remote, and the various stages of vaccinations and if and when and how. And, I'd love to hear some of your thoughts or insights specifically around that. And
For
maybe it's
sure,
not
yeah.
necessary.
Yeah, I don't know. I have mixed feelings on it. I think most of the folks, like, I know some agencies, like they really are like a close-knit team and they're like a family, and they go out to happy hour on Fridays and all that. And that's not us. I wouldn't say we don't have culture, but I would never say like, hey, let's have a meeting Friday night and we'll all like hang out and drink beer remotely, or like do some game or something. Like everybody's going home to their families and doing that, and I wouldn't ever want to assume that what we're doing here is more important than that. So with culture, I think early on we started meeting up at conferences. So like for us, DjangoCon, there's one in US and one in Europe, usually every year. So we would start doing meetups at those and meeting people. And then as we kind of grew a little bit and, we're a little more financially stable, we started doing offsite meetups. So we'll do like 1 week where we go someplace. It's usually someplace, for somebody, it's going to be someplace exotic because everybody's coming from different areas. So we went to Greece, Portugal, Mexico. What else? I think there was Thailand. We kind of promised the guy in New Zealand that, he's usually flying like a day and a half to get to wherever we are. So we did Thailand, which was only like 12 hours for him or something like that. And those are great. And, I kind of have mixed feelings on those, like, pulling people away from their family for a week. And we've talked about maybe having it where families can come or something like that. And, it's expensive, but it's probably cheaper than renting an office space for a year. So that's well worth it. And I will say, the first time meeting people in person was really eye-opening. Like there was some people that, I kind of had in my head, like who they were and why they acted the way they did, and meeting them in person, it was like, oh, like that's not who you are at all. Like, you know, you're really different. And so that was huge for kind of that team building, morale, culture, all that. I think kind of society norms or cultural norms are a real challenge when you're working with people from all these different countries. We have a developer in Germany who's told me, like, it's impossible for me to understand feedback from people in the States because everybody's like, yeah, it's great, you know, like, and he's like in Germany, he would be like, no, I don't like this. It's not good. Like, you know, and that's like, you're direct and honest. And in the States, like, we sugarcoat everything. And so he told me, you know, like, if somebody tells me it's good, then I know it's terrible. And if they say it's awesome, then I guess it's probably pretty good. Like, you know, so like all of us kind of figuring out these different barometers of kind of how people act. And I think it was interesting. I think in general, I could say, like, the folks in Europe were a lot more direct than the folks in the States, and all of us kind of figuring that out and having a couple, you know, kind of difficult conversations around that. Like, you know, in the States, we're like, God, why is this guy being such an asshole? And it's like, no, he's not being an asshole. He's just like, you know, this is like, he's telling you the truth, and it's not an emotional discussion for him. But like in the States, we're all like, oh, you know, he's hurting my feelings. And so yeah, that's been a learning experience for sure.
It's so, you know, it's so clear to me as you're talking, like, you guys have built in this remote, you know, virtual agency you've built such a wonderful clarity around your brand and who you are and who's going to be successful, that it speaks, like, I don't know if you know that, I'm sure you do, you know, but the value that you're, like, people, their value system that you're hiring for too, you know, and what, you know, working at many different companies versus, you know, at some point you reach an age where you don't want to go out for beer on Friday. You just want to go home and eat pizza and watch television or whatever it is. You know what I mean? And so
Yeah.
in the States, we're so ingrained as that's a piece of how you meet people. Or like, what if you don't drink? Or what if you don't live in an area that, you know, you have a massive commute and you always miss out on that? Like, it's just so interesting to hear the way that you guys have been able, you know, the in-person sounds like it's a major value, but when you're together, you know that it's a major value rather than taken for granted.
Right.
It's just, I mean, I could listen to you talk about it all day because I think it's really interesting. That's super cheesy, but all right. So we've got a few more official questions, and we've gone off script here a little bit, but it was an interesting conversation. So I want to go back to some of our, you know, regularly scheduled questions. So you guys, as in, you know, normally would ask you what your superpower is as an agency. I think we've kind of hit the nail on the head there a couple of times with your niche and your remote abilities there. So you as an agency owner, what keeps you up at night? What's that thing that you roll around in bed going, ugh.
It's probably, I've really strong faith in our team's ability to deliver, and I don't have concerns really anymore about, you know, like running out of money or not being able to make payroll, you know, which definitely, like, there were some years where that was scary and kept me up at night. I think now probably more like we're working with larger clients. They've got big websites that, you know, they're out there in the public. Like people know about them, they see them. And yeah, like, you know, that one of those disasters, like, you know, there's some bug in it that, like, you know, somebody gets access to it and deletes the database or something, you know, like just like a major production outage that's like irrecoverable, or, you know, like, you know, sometimes I have that feeling of like, oh God, like what if something happened, you know, what if one of our clients' AWS credentials got hacked? And, you know, there's certainly ways to deal with that, but clients kind of have a, you know, they're comfortable with a certain level of risk, and how much are they willing to pay to have kind of redundancy and backups, and everybody's different with that. But yeah, I think that one, I generally sleep pretty well at night. But yeah, kind of like having somebody that's got a big launch or something, and you know, the wheels fall off or something like that.
Yeah, what one little
that-
thing did you not check? And
yeah. that scares me sometimes, but yeah, generally I try not to take work much beyond. I think I learned that early on. Like, I was a train wreck starting this, and stressed out, and you know, kind of a constant level of anxiety, and was like, this, I don't want to live my life this way. And I think that's when I kind of learned, like, I need to give up control on this. Otherwise, I'm like, this is not enjoyable. And I think that was a huge eye opener for me. You know, I just being like, what's going to happen is going to happen. And I'm going to hire good people, and I'm going to let them do their job. And I'm not going to stay up at night worrying about whether it's going to happen or not.
It's great to hear that. I mean, many agencies owners that we speak to, they bring up, you know, when we ask this question, they would say, you know, growth, sales, business dev, those new clients acquisition. So those are the things keep them up at night. So it's interesting to hear that you are in a pretty good spot. Like, you don't have those challenges. Then let me ask you, like, what is your growth strategy? Is that something that you stay away from? You're not looking for growth, or is that not something that is worrying you? Like, how do you look at growth?
Yeah. Yeah, I think you like, you know, like talking about like staying up at night, worrying about sales and stuff. I feel like if you're in this business long enough, you realize, like, there are ups and downs, and like the business, like, it always comes, and it's, you know, as soon as you start freaking out about it, like a new client comes in the door or whatever. And I've kind of just gotten my zen on with that. Like, you know, the last half of last year, I think at one point, like, I checked that, like, our contact form was still working on our website. It was like, we aren't getting any new leads, and it was totally fine because our, you know, we couldn't really take on any new leads at the time. But and then, you know, the beginning of this year, there's like, it's like I'm in meetings all day talking to people about new projects. So yeah, you get used to that. And as far as sorry, I lost my train of thought. Your question was slightly different on that.
I love the comment though about checking to make sure the contact form is, because I think 100% of people listening to that have done that at least
Yeah.
once in their careers. Like, is it working? Like, is something broken? Did I miss something? I think we're talking about growth. Like, what are your future plans?
Growth,
What are you
right.
thinking? Where do you want to
So-
take the agency?
Yeah, I a while ago at one of our kind of offsite retreats, we had this discussion, and we definitely operate more as a, you know, democracy than a dictatorship. And so we kind of talked as a team, like, what does the next 10 years look like? Where do we want to be? What do we want to be doing? And the general consensus was growth is not a priority for us. And we would rather be saying no to people occasionally than growing. And I think part of that is the stress that brings. You know, the more people you have, the more mouths you have to feed, the more likely you are to take business that might not be, you know, you see some red flags, but you're like, I got to take it because we got to keep, you know, we got to keep this machine going. And since we've kind of come to that conclusion, I've talked with a couple of, you know, at least a couple of agency owners that made that jump from the 10-person agency to the 40, 50-person agency. And they were like, and I'm jealous. Like, I kind of wish we didn't do that. Like, it's, you know, it's not as enjoyable as it used to be. And, you know, my understanding from everybody I talked to is like, you can be 15, maybe 20 people, but after that, you're 40, 50. Like, it's hard to operate in that middle ground because, you need sales, you need HR, you need like this hierarchy that then you have to fill in.
Creative
And I'm sure
adjacent.
there's, what's that?
You know, deliverable adjacent people, the
Yeah,
support staff, you know, your CFOs, your,
yeah.
you know,
And I'm sure there's counter examples to that, but generally that's what I hear people say. And so our team has been pretty happy at that kind of 15-ish number, and we can operate relatively a flat structure with that. You know, I can kind of have in my head everything that everybody's doing, and you know, we don't need multiple managers and all that. And so that works for us, and we're profitable. And it's hard at times. It's hard to see a good client come in the door and be like, we just can't do it, you know? But it's not often that happens. And I think it's really worth it to not have the flip side of it, which is there's no new clients coming in, and, you know, how do we keep people busy now? How do we, you know, keep the money coming in? So we're pretty comfortable with that. We have been doing more kind of support and maintenance style work lately. We found, like, generally a big client comes to us, we build out some big site for them, and then the idea is, you know, when we start, the idea is kind of like, yeah, you know, like you'll hand it off to your team or whatever, and they enjoy working with us and want to keep working with us. So we've kind of figured out a way to make sort of part-time, just keep the lights on, or, you know, new features trickling in work, and that I can see maybe being like a more kind of scalable business. But this custom development and having, you know, we kind of pride ourselves that everybody's senior level developers. That's a harder business to scale, I think. And yeah, I think we're pretty happy at the size we're at.
cool. Let me ask you this, since you were so intuitive when you started picking Python and Django, you know, at this point, what do you see in the future? What's coming? You know, what are you exciting about? What's next? Give us some predictive insights, courtesy of
Yeah,
Pete.
you know, I would only conjecture about things on the kind of, you know, development and technology side, because that's my background. And honestly, like it's kind of depressing to see where we've ended up. Like there's just the idea that like a single person can do this anymore is becoming less and less realistic. You know, when I started, it was like, yeah, you had a webmaster or whatever, and like that was the person that managed your website. And now, like, no, you need somebody who's an expert in React, and somebody who knows AWS, and somebody who knows, you know, backend development. And that, like, I don't know, that kind of makes me sad. Like I don't know how you, having to start out and having to, like, the barrier for entry is so high. I feel like I don't know, and I don't know if there's anything happening that's heading in the other direction. It just feels like we're adding, you know, layer upon layer upon layer. So I don't know. I've seen some fads come and go. You know, I remember shortly after I got started with Django, like NoSQL, like everybody needed a NoSQL database. That was like, why doesn't Django have a NoSQL database? Like, I'm going to switch to another framework because I can't use my NoSQL database. And like, yeah, people still use MongoDB and stuff, but generally, like, people learn like Postgres and MySQL are good products, and there's a reason why we use them. And so, you know, and then it was, I think we're still kind of in the area of like, you know, everything needs to be like a JavaScript front end driven by some API backend. And I'm hoping that pendulum, you know, that I wouldn't call it a fad, but I think people are realizing not every site needs that, and we can do stuff more simply. And we don't need to bring in, you know, React and all this stuff into every single website we build, and we can actually build them a lot like faster and more reliable and deliver them faster to users, then if we do that, that being said, we do React work, and there's certainly places where, really kind of dynamic front ends make sense, but it's not for every site. And so I guess I would kind of hope that we kind of swing the pendulum back a little bit on the complexity and find that some simpler tooling can get people websites that work really well. But as far as where we're, I don't have a lot of faith in that. It seems like it's getting more and more complex and harder for your average person to set up a website.
It's interesting. It's like if you want anything that isn't going to work on a no code, like a Wix, Squarespace, one of these, Webflow might be the middle junior ground of that, but anything after, you have to go with that stack of people, because there's different levels of, like you listed, about half a dozen of them in there. I'm not even going to try. But it's interesting. All right. I have one final question. If you were going to pick a superpower, what's your superpower, Pete? You personally? We've talked a little bit about your story. We've talked about your company. You've talked about some of the interesting ways you guys run things. What would you say is your superpower?
Oh gosh, that's a hard
it's a hard
question.
one. Aside from surfing in snow country.
Yeah, I wish that were my superpower. Not quite there yet. I would say probably, I'm not the best developer in the world, and I know I don't, there's people that are better at operating an agency than me. I think I probably, maybe one thing that sets me apart is the thing that I kind of hinted at before, like the ability to not stress out about stuff and let stuff slide and realize like we're all trying to wear a bunch of hats and keep a bunch of things in the air, and there's never enough time in the day, and things are going to drop, and that's okay. And I think that is the way this business works for me, and I think that kind of translates to how our business operates. And I think people feel that, like there's an expectation that you get your work done and you're professional and all that, but nobody's expecting everything. And I think, we have new people come in and they're like, hey, I want to, I was going to go to a conference in a couple months. Like, is that okay? And I'm like, yeah, it's fine. Like we're going to be fine. And, being like this agency that's full stack, we have some areas where we don't have a lot of extra coverage. Like if one of our Django developers has some life event and needs to leave for a month, like that's real easy for us to fill in. But if our, UX or JavaScript, person, like we lose one of them, like that's harder. But I always try to make sure people know, like in a good way, like you're replaceable, like not like we're going to go hire somebody else, but
replaceable.
Like this is not all on your shoulders, and we'll figure it out, and the company will continue, and it's all going to be okay. And part of that I think was working with some of our folks in Europe. We work with a guy in France who's like, yeah, I'm taking 2 months off. Like, and that's in France, that's totally normal. And, the first time he told me that, I was like, crap, what, like, how am I supposed to work? Like, our client projects around this, and we figured it out, and it's fine. And so having that flexibility, if I had to say, I'm not comfortable calling it a superpower, but I'd say that maybe that's something a little different. That is how I operate. Yeah, I think folks appreciate it.
Totally a superpower for me. That is something I'm working on for myself. I mean, I just heard a talk earlier this morning. You must have heard of the guy on Deepak Chopra. It's a doctor, and he's working on, he's writing a book, and he was talking about all of that, the mindfulness and how to control your anxiety and how to stay in the state of flow and always be calm and composed. Everybody right now is dealing with the stress. something will happen bad in their family, in their personal life, in their business, and how to keep yourself calm is a superpower, right? I mean, if you're able to do that, I mean, nothing better can happen, or nothing better should happen than that. So that's great to hear.
It's called managed when people get hit by a bus. I know that's so morbid, but that's the running joke that I've always used with my teams. What are you going to do if that person gets hit by a bus? And they're like, that's disgusting. I'm like, something's going to happen. What are we going to do about it? So make sure you document, make sure so I think that is a good superpower. So, well, this was great. Thanks so much for coming on and chatting with us. We appreciate it. So where people can find you, make sure I'm not missing anything in this list. Ready? So we have LinkedIn, Twitter. I am IPMB, correct?
Yes.
Your company website, lincolnloop.com. And then your books at highperformancedjango.com. Did I miss any other critical Pete Baumgartner links?
I have been working on a new product that's early days, but I'll throw it out there. It's called AppPack, and it's apppack.io, APPPACK.
Nice, apppack.io. Well, thank you so much. That's it, everyone. If you learned something today, or you learned how to do something different today in running your agencies, this podcast, please tell somebody about it. Thanks, everyone. See you next time. Thanks for listening. Find our other episodes on agenciesthatbuild.com. Plus, we're listed anywhere you find your favorite podcast.